All right, so today we're diving deep into Jordan B. Peterson's 12 Rules for Life. We're going to be working with, excerpts from the book itself. We want to give you the key takeaways, the core ideas, maybe touch on some of the controversies.
Yeah, and I'll be here to kind of connect the dots and eliminate the deeper meaning and offer some so what insights.
Okay, perfect. So the book kicks off with this funny anecdote about Moses coming down from Mount Sinai with the 10 Commandments. And the crowd is like, hallelujah. And then, wait, adultery is still a no-no. So he really nails that human struggle with rules, doesn't he? We know they're good for us, but part of us always wants to rebel.
Yeah, it's such a great way to start the book. And it just sort of sets the stage for his approach in general. I mean, he's clearly an intellectual heavyweight, but he's also refreshingly honest about, like, the messy process of figuring things out.
Yeah.
He's thinking out loud. He's challenging his own assumptions. He's inviting the reader to do the same.
You can totally feel that in his writing style. He calls it motoric thinking. It's like he's wrestling with these ideas in real time.
Yeah.
And you're right there with them, in the thick of it. But he's also aiming for something beyond just the academic theorizing, right?
See,
like he wants to make these ideas relevant to everyday life.
Yeah, he bridges this gap between, like, the rigorous scholarship and practical wisdom,
Yeah.
Like, he's not afraid to go really deep into these complex concepts, but he also wants to make them accessible to, like, everyone, not just academics.
Yeah, and one of those complex concepts is the idea of the meaning crisis.
Oh, yeah.
Which, that sounds pretty heavy, but I think a lot of people can relate to it on some level, right?
Totally. It's that feeling of being lost, adrift.
Yeah.
Without a sense of purpose or direction in life. And it's the sense that something is missing, even if you have all the external markers of success, like money or career or whatever. And Peterson sees this as a defining characteristic of our modern age. He thinks that a lot of the traditional sources of meaning, religion, family, community, that kind of stuff, those have been eroded. And that leaves people feeling disoriented.
Right. And uncertain about their place in the world.
Exactly.
And this connects to another big idea he brings in the interplay of chaos and order. And this is something we see, like, recurring throughout the book.
Yeah, for sure. It's foundational to his thinking.
Okay.
He sees chaos and order as, like, these fundamental forces that shape human experience. So chaos represents the unknown, the unpredictable. It's the force of change and disruption and possibility.
Okay, so what about order then?
So order represents structure, stability, predictability.
Okay.
It's the force of, like, tradition and rules, social norms. And Peterson argues that both are essential for a meaningful life. Like, if you have too much chaos, it leads to anxiety, fear, that kind of thing. But too much order can lead to stagnation, rigidity.
So it's about finding that balance between the two. It's about navigating the chaos without being overwhelmed by it, while also creating enough order in your life to feel grounded.
And he uses some pretty powerful metaphors to illustrate this, like the frozen lake idea.
Oh, yeah. So the frozen lake represents order, right? Like a solid surface that you can walk on.
Yeah.
But underneath is chaos, the depths that can swallow you whole.
Okay, so it's a good visual.
Right. And then there's the one with the puppet becoming real.
Yeah.
I think that one's really interesting. The puppet represents the individual, and the strings represent the chaos.
So it's not about eliminating the chaos. It's about learning to, like, dance with it.
That's a really good way to put it, yeah. It's about finding that balance between the two forces, within ourselves and in the world.
And this all ties into that first rule, stand up straight with your shoulders back, which is where he brings in the whole lobster thing.
Lobsters, yeah.
I have to admit, that's what first drew me to the book, too. Who knew lobsters could teach us so much about life? It's definitely an attention grabber. So he uses these lobsters to illustrate, the deep biological roots of social hierarchies. And he argues that this extends back to our earliest ancestors. He points to the fact that lobsters, like humans, have a nervous system that's sensitive to serotonin.
Which is a neurochemical that's associated with mood and social status.
Right.
So, like, dominant lobsters have higher levels of serotonin.
Yeah.
And that means they have more confident posture, more aggressive behavior,
Exactly. And Peterson suggests that a similar dynamic might be at play in humans. He says that our posture, our body language, our physical health can be influenced by our social status.
Okay, so it's not just about looking confident. There might be like a biological basis for actually feeling more confident.
Right. Now, obviously, human social dynamics are way more complex than lobsters.
Yeah, right.
A lot of other things going on. But, Peterson's point is that we shouldn't underestimate the power of our physical presence.
Yeah.
And how it interacts with our social world.
So by standing up straight, we're not just projecting confidence. We might actually be influencing our own brain chemistry.
Yeah, it's an interesting possibility. And it kind of raises all these questions about free will and, like, how much control do we really have?
Yeah. Mind-blowing.
Oh.
But also empowering in a way. Like, if something as simple as posture can affect our mood,
Yeah.
maybe we have more agency than we think.
Absolutely. And I think that's a key takeaway from Peterson's work.
Yeah.
He's reminding us that we're not just victims of our circumstances or biology. We have the power to make choices.
Yeah.
To take responsibility.
And that leads us to Rule 4, which is all about comparisons.
Okay.
So he says that we should compare ourselves to who we were yesterday, not to somebody else today.
Yeah.
And this is super relevant, like, in the age of social media.
It's so true.
Where everyone is, curating their perfect life online.
Totally. It's so easy to fall into the trap of comparing ourselves to others, especially on social media. And that leads to envy, self-doubt. But Peterson's suggesting a different approach.
Yeah.
One that's focused on personal growth and self-improvement.
So instead of feeling bad because someone else, seems to have it all together, we should be focusing on our own progress.
Yeah, like what progress have you made? What are you working on?
Yeah.
And there's actually research to support this idea. Like, studies have shown that focusing on growth rather than comparison leads to greater happiness.
Yeah, totally. Totally. It makes sense.
It's about taking control of your own narrative, not letting it be dictated by, external forces or whatever.
And that connects back to this idea of taking responsibility for our own lives, right? It's about realizing we have the power to change, to grow.
Exactly. And that sense of agency, that feeling of being in control of your own destiny, that's essential for a meaningful life.
So focusing on our progress and comparing ourselves to who we were yesterday, we're not just like boosting our self-esteem, but we're taking a step toward creating a more fulfilling life.
Powerful idea.
Yeah, really powerful.
And it reminds us that self-improvement is a journey. It takes time, it takes perseverance.
Yeah. It's worth taking, though, right?
Absolutely.
Because it's about becoming the best version of ourselves, not just for ourselves, but for the world around us.
I wholeheartedly agree.
Okay, now get ready for this one, because this one really hit me. Tell the truth, or at least don't lie. And he dives into some really tough stories here, including one about a young man named Chris who struggled with addiction and ultimately took his own life. It's really heartbreaking. But it speaks to the profound consequences of dishonesty, both to ourselves and others.
Yeah, it's a powerful reminder that our words have power, that even little white lies can have ripple effects. And, Chris's story really shows the danger of living a life that's not aligned with your values.
Peterson also talks about his friend, Ed, who was facing his own challenges. And this story gets to the heart of the difficulties in helping others.
Yeah, it's interesting how he kind of explores the limits of compassion here, He acknowledges that natural human desire to help, but he also cautions against enabling harmful behavior.
So he's challenging us to think about the difference between helping and enabling.
Exactly. And he raises all these questions about boundaries and self-care. When we're trying to help other people, it's important to take care of ourselves too.
Yeah, you can't pour from an empty cup.
Right, exactly. Yeah. You need to have your own reserves of strength if you want to help others.
So it's about finding that balance between compassion and responsibility, supporting others, but also setting healthy boundaries.
It's tough, but essential if you want to navigate these situations where you're trying to help people.
It speaks to that broader theme of personal responsibility that runs through the whole book, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We can't control everything, but we can control how we respond.
I think that's a perfect place to pause for now. I mean, we've covered so much in this first part of our deep dive.
Yeah.
From the 10 Commandments to truth and compassion and responsibility.
A lot to think about.
But there's still so much more to explore.
Oh, yeah. We've only just scratched the surface.
Stay tuned, folks, because things are about to get even more interesting.
These stories about Chris and Ed, they really highlight this tension, between wanting to help people and the realities of suffering. It brings us face to face with these questions about sacrifice and meaning.
Yeah.
and our responsibility to each other.
Yeah, no, it's heavy stuff. And he doesn't shy away from those big questions. Like, he goes deep into these ancient narratives, the Bible stories, Adam and Eve, Cain and Abel.
Right.
And it's all about temptation, betrayal, consequences.
Yeah, and he sees these stories as like these representations of the human condition, right? Playing out across cultures and throughout history. So they're grappling with this tension, the tension between individual desire and what society needs, the nature of good and evil, and just trying to find meaning in this world that often feels chaotic and unfair.
Yeah. So it's like he's saying these ancient stories, they still hold some wisdom for us today.
Exactly. He's not saying we have to interpret them literally.
Right.
But they contain these psychological and spiritual insights that can help us understand ourselves.
And he brings in these philosophers like Nietzsche and Dostoevsky.
Oh, yeah.
Who were wrestling with these same big questions about human existence.
Yeah. I mean, you think about Nietzsche's God is dead. Right. He was saying that we've undermined the foundations of belief, and now we're just kind of adrift. And then you have Dostoevsky, who like really explored the dark side of human nature, the struggle with faith and doubt, and the potential for both good and evil inside all of us.
So he's like weaving all these threads together, ancient mythology, philosophy, psychology, to create this like tapestry of the human experience with all of its, light and darkness.
Yeah, he's really good at bringing these different perspectives together.
And he makes this connection, right, between these philosophical ideas and the rise of ideology in the 20th century, especially those that are driven by resentment.
Oh, yeah.
And revenge. Like, he uses some pretty intense examples, like the Soviet Union and how they treated the kulaks.
Yeah, the kulaks, these were like the relatively wealthy peasants, and they were targeted during the collectivization of agriculture in the Soviet Union.
Yeah. So, like, stripped of their land, their possessions, often deported or executed.
Brutal. And it's just like this really stark example of how ideology fueled by resentment can lead to these horrible things.
Yeah, it's a reminder of what can happen when we let resentment fester. It can turn into something really toxic.
Absolutely. And, Peterson sees this happening today.
Oh, really?
In identity politics and cancel culture. This tendency to see the world through this lens of victimhood. He's worried that these things are creating a culture of division and hostility.
So, like, what's the antidote, then, to all this? What's the way out?
Well, he keeps coming back to this idea of personal responsibility, self-improvement, finding meaning in your own life, not trying to tear other people down.
Okay.
He's advocating for, like, a strong sense of individualism, I guess, where you focus on building yourself up, contributing to the world in positive ways.
So, like, focusing on what we can control, rather than getting bogged down in the negativity.
Exactly. And he believes that this individual focus ultimately makes society stronger.
It's like that Gandhi quote, be the change you want to see.
Yeah, exactly. Like Peterson saying, the best way to make the world better is to start with yourself.
And he's big on discipline, isn't he? Like, really pushing ourselves.
He's not giving us a feel-good, self-help kind of approach. It's rigorous. It can be uncomfortable. It's about really examining yourself, confronting your weaknesses.
Yeah, and he uses the example of his landlord, Dennis, a former biker gang president.
Yes. He had struggled with addiction, violence, but he turned his life around.
And it shows that change is possible, even after going through those really tough times.
But it also shows how important it is to take responsibility for yourselves and to be willing to face your demons.
Yeah, no sugarcoating it. It's tough. It's challenging.
And then there's Chris's story, his friend from Fairview, which we talked about before. And it's just a reminder that sometimes people make choices that have tragic consequences.
And that no matter how hard we try, we can't always fix things for other people.
It's a tough lesson. And, it ties into Peterson's critique of the modern world, where he sees this, like, aimlessness, this nihilism.
Especially among younger people.
Yeah. We've lost our moral compass. We've lost our sense of purpose.
Okay.
Our belief in something bigger than ourselves. He's really critical of what he sees as the excesses of the academic left.
Yeah, he talks about that a lot.
He thinks it promotes a victimhood mentality, a culture of resentment. And he says it's weakening individual character, and it's hurting society as a whole.
So it's not just about individual responsibility, it's also about having a shared set of values, right?
Exactly. Like a moral framework to guide us. Peterson believes that a healthy society needs a strong moral foundation, one that's based on principles like truth and justice. And he sees these principles being eroded. And he thinks that's dangerous for all of us.
He really likes to stir the pot, doesn't he?
Well, he does. He likes to poke and prod. And, you might not agree with him all the time, but he makes you think. And I think that's what a great thinker does. They challenge us. They make us confront those uncomfortable truths. But he's not all doom and gloom, right? He also offers solutions.
Yeah, he's giving us a way to reclaim meaning and purpose.
Exactly. And this brings us to his last rule, the one that seems a little strange at first. Pet a cat when you encounter one on the street.
Yeah, okay. I'm still trying to wrap my head around that one.
Huh.
How does petting a cat make life more meaningful?
Well, think about it. It's a simple act, like engaging with the world. It's a reminder to find joy, even in the small things.
Okay.
And in a world where we're constantly bombarded with screens and information, those little moments of joy are so important.
Yeah, it's like a little mini meditation, bringing yourself back to the present.
Right. And it's about balance. Like, yes, we need to work hard and we need to strive for things, but we also need to rest, to play, to experience joy.
Yeah, it's a beautiful image, and it speaks to that message of finding meaning in the midst of the chaos.
Exactly. And it's a reminder that sometimes the simplest things are the most profound.
Okay, I like that. I think that's a great place to pause for now.
Yeah, we've covered some heavy stuff. The dangers of ideology, the need for responsibility, the importance of a moral framework.
Lobsters, cats, the death of God. We've been all over the place.
We've been on a journey. But there's still more to explore. In the final part, we'll delve deeper into this interplay of chaos and order, the importance of confronting our shadows, and what it means to find a meaningful path in life.
All right, folks, stay tuned. All right, so we've talked about lobsters and cats and these ancient myths, even the death of God. Like, where do we even go from here?
Well, we've been kind of dancing around one of Peterson's most important ideas, this interplay of chaos and order, and I think it's time to dive into it.
Okay, yeah. We've touched on it with the frozen lake and the puppet, but I'm ready to unpack it.
Yeah.
What's the big deal with this chaos and order thing? Why does it matter so much?
So Peterson argues that this back and forth between chaos and order, it's not just some abstract philosophical concept. It's like built into how we exist. Think about it. From the tiniest little particle to the whole universe, there's this tension, this push and pull between things that create and things that destroy, forces that organize and forces that disrupt.
That makes sense. We see it everywhere in nature.
Yeah.
Changing seasons, stars being born and dying, even our own bodies. They're always breaking down and rebuilding.
Exactly. It's like this constant cycle. And it's not just outside of us, it's inside each of us too. We all want stability, predictability. We want to feel in control of our lives. But then we also need novelty, adventure, things that challenge us, that push us.
So it's like we're always trying to find that middle ground, the balance between the known and the unknown.
Yeah, that's it. Too much chaos, we get anxious, afraid, overwhelmed, but too much order. And we stagnate, we get bored, we feel trapped. It's about finding that sweet spot where we can tap into the creative energy of chaos, but also have enough structure to feel safe.
This reminds me of something else Peterson talks about, the whole shadow thing, which, if I'm being honest, it's always kind of freaked me out. It sounds so dark.
I know, right? It's definitely not the most cheerful topic. But Peterson, he's drawing on Jung here, Carl Jung. And they argue that we have to confront our shadow if we want to grow.
So, okay, what exactly is the shadow? Is it our evil twin?
No, not like that. It's not about being possessed by some, evil spirit. It's more about those parts of ourselves that we hide.
Okay.
The negative stuff.
The stuff we don't like to admit we have.
Exactly. Yeah. The anger, the jealousy, the selfish urges, all of that. We kind of sweep it under the rug because it makes us uncomfortable.
Okay.
But Peterson says that when we ignore those parts of ourselves, they don't actually go away. They just kind of fester. And then they come out in ways that we don't expect, in ways that aren't healthy.
Right, because we've all been there, right? You try to push down some feeling and then later, boom, it explodes.
Exactly. It's like, trying to hold a beach ball underwater. You can do it for a little while, but eventually, whoosh, it's going to pop right back up.
So how do we deal with our shadow? How do we confront it? It seems pretty intimidating.
It's not easy, for sure. But the first step is just becoming aware of it, noticing those thoughts, those feelings that we usually push away.
So paying attention to when we judge ourselves really harshly, or when we get triggered by something someone says.
Yeah. It's about bringing those shadowy parts of ourselves into the light where we can actually see them, understand them. And then the idea is, we can start to integrate them into a more I guess, a more whole sense of who we are.
I'm seeing how this connects to the chaos and order thing now. It's like our shadow is this inner chaos that we have to learn to work with instead of trying to pretend it doesn't exist.
Right, exactly. And Peterson actually thinks that this process of confronting our shadow, it can actually be a really powerful source of growth. You know, when we face our darkness, that's also when we open ourselves up to our full potential.
It's like those stories, those myths where the hero has to go into the underworld, face all these scary things, and then they come out stronger.
That's it. And Peterson sees this journey of facing ourselves, of integrating these different parts of ourselves. He sees it as like essential for having a meaningful life.
So it's not just about like navel gazing, sitting around thinking about ourselves all day. It's about taking those insights and then putting them into action.
Exactly. Like taking what you learn about yourself and using it to guide how you act in the world. Living a life that's both, true to yourself and also has a purpose.
And this takes us back to that idea of personal responsibility that's all over the book. It's like realizing we have the power to choose our path. We can't always control what happens to us, but we can control how we respond.
And that's where that final rule, the cat petting rule, it all kind of comes together. It's like it's reminding us to find joy even when things are tough, to appreciate the little things, to be curious about the world. It's about balancing that drive to achieve our goals with just being present, with finding the beauty in the everyday.
It's a really powerful message, and one that I think we can all hold on to, as we go through life.
I think so too. And it's a good place to wrap up our deep dive. I mean, we've covered a lot, some tough stuff, but also some really hopeful ideas. And I think ultimately what Peterson's work does is it gives us this sense of possibility, that we can grow, that we can change, and that we have a responsibility, to make the world a better place.
I couldn't have said it better myself. Thank you so much for taking us on this journey. And to you, our listeners, thanks for joining us. We hope this deep dive has given you some new things to think about, maybe some new questions to ask, and who knows, maybe even a little more clarity on your own path. Until next time, keep searching, keep questioning, and of course, keep petting those cats.